Hello, Becky, and hello. This is Up Your Vibe Radio, and we're coming from the Coach on Fire Network. And today, as you already know, we have got Becky Walsh. Now, Becky is no stranger to Up Your Vibe Radio. She's been with us before talking about intuition and the gut. And today, she's going to be talking about flowing with your justifiable anger. And I know that this is going to be an interesting subject for many people, because how many of us can put our hands up and say, we've not lost our temper or been angry? So over to you, Becky. Can you introduce yourself to the audience today?
Hello, I'm Becky Walsh. Hello, and thanks for inviting me on the show, Paula. Really appreciate it. Really, really kind of you to invite me back twice. Can't have been so bad the first time then.
You were marvellous.
So I work as an intuitive catalyst for people who are stuck on things in life. I've got a private practice in Weston-super-Mare, Bristol, and also in London as well, so I get around a bit. In Weston, I have a little company called Ample Southwest, where we bring personal development to Weston-super-Mare and to businesses in the Southwest, teaching emotional resilience and also emotional intelligence. That's off the back of my book, You Do Know, Learning to Act on Intuition Instantly, which is published by Hay House. I'm the past radio presenter for LBC, the station LBC, and also I freelance for the BBC as well. What else do I do? So I've authored 5 books, and I've got online courses, and just generally everything you'd expect from somebody who's a bit busy, really.
But what I really love about you, Becky, is that you present things in such a uniquely down-to-earth, funny style, and you don't take yourself too seriously, although the subjects that you do talk about are actually really quite serious.
Yeah, and I think that this is part of it, really, isn't it? Because there's this sort of kind of sense of, if it's going to be transformational, we have to take it earnestly. So this idea that problems are deep and hard. And of course, when you do that, you get straight into your victimhood. My life is hard and it's deep. And of course, what happens over a period of time, so say, for example, and I know that we're going to be talking about anger today, so this is a good way of kind of like bridging into that. You think about anger, you think about old people, I know that there should be a politically correct version of that. The elderly, one day we'll just have to come up with something for them. Let's just call them old people, because I'm well on that spectrum, well on my way to that spectrum. And I don't think my mother would mind. She calls herself an old person. I think wise woman, I don't know, whatever, old. But when you sort of like get people who have got stuck in a personality trait, so you might say, and we use this all the time, don't we? Like miserable old sod.
Yes.
Angry, blah, 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 blah. Or she's, bitter old bag. Where does that start? And actually it starts in this kind of, it starts in lacking humour. It starts in the moment that something bad happens to you and you buy into it. So this bad thing happens. And say, for example, we become grief-stricken about a loss. And that grief-stricken means that we become kind of like almost perpetually sad, like a sense of homesickness all of the time. And then you sort of start to say, well, I am sad. And then you go, okay, well, I am sad. And then it starts to kind of become a character of who you are. Or, well, that person's quite sad. It's like we go from it being a feeling, something that we're experiencing, to being something that we are, and it becomes part of our character. And then eventually it becomes so wholehearted, then by the time you're old, you'd be like, oh, that sad old cow next door, the one that shouts at the kids every time their ball goes over the wall. Oh my God, she's like some kind of horrible witch. When we actually buy into our problems actually become part of our personality. So using a sense of humour about it, obviously, what am I talking about here? Using a sense of humour around grief? Well, this is what the Irish have wakes for. I think that using a sense of humour around whatever you've got going on in your life means it doesn't become attached to you like a condition, which means that you can move through it and have more flow with it. So that's why I use humour in my therapy sessions and my one-to-ones and my teaching and even in my books.
Yeah, I think that means you can also distance yourself from it a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely, because it's not who you are. It's not who you are. So if you can laugh at it, you've detached yourself from it. You know, and humour's an interesting thing because, you know, we never laugh at the underdog. So, for example, in the world of political correctness, you know, why is it that we seem to be able to mock and laugh at Americans, and yet we couldn't do that for somebody from India? And the answer is the power dynamic. We assume that people with a lot of money in a rich country who are really powerful, well, you're open game. It's the same way as you can't take the mick out of a short person, but you can take the mick out of a tall person because they have the power dynamic. Now, obviously, when I say you can and you can't, these aren't my rules. These are just like observations. When you look at humanity, humanity seems to be able to laugh at things that we find to be powerful. Now, that's quite amusing until you kind of think about how that affects women. When you're rising up and you're becoming really good at what you do and you're becoming strong and you're becoming popular, you know, we all love, women love empowering women. What are you actually saying when you say that you want to empower women? You're basically saying that they're less than you.
Exactly.
So you're already coming off like a get-go of negative, putting someone down. But it's really interesting, and having had this happen in my own life, that, you know, lots of support while you're on the road up and you're the underdog going up. But the minute you're successful and doing really well, support disappears at the point when you need it the most. And that's because it's easy for people to take the mick or bitch about or be rude about somebody at the top of their game, because you wouldn't be doing that at the bottom of their game. And it's one of those rules about humour, which is kind of crazy in some way, because we should all be able to, in a sense, laugh with and never at. And the difference in how you know comes down to an episode, I think it was of the Simpsons or one of those ones, where they said, "I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing with you." But I'm not laughing. That's how you can tell. If the person's not laughing, it's not humour.
No. So when we'll get back to the subject, because justifiable anger, is there actually such a thing as justifiable anger?
What do you mean? No, sorry. Yeah, there is. We'll talk about that. Yeah.
Okay, because from I heard a saying the other day, and it sort of quite stuck with me before we'd even talked about doing this show, and it said anger is a good response because it's better than feeling like you want to hurt someone. But I thought, how can that be true? Because they're both closely related.
Are they though? And I mean, and this is the thing, and this is why I kind of like quantify it as it being justifiable anger. And I think, yes, you sort of think that anger comes before you punch someone in the face. Like pride comes before a fall. But
sometimes.
I don't believe that. I think that's what they tell you when they don't want you to rise and be brilliant. But, you know, I think that we associate anger with actually losing yourself in some way, that you lose who you are and you lose your values. And you lose the things that are important to you when you become angry. And that can happen because of the reptilian, well, it's the part of the brain that is reactive. So your reactive part of the brain goes quicker than your logical part of the brain. So when we think about anger, we think about that reactive part of the brain kicking off and that taking over the logical part of the brain. So that could even be something as you get an email and you think it's a right snippy, horrible email. So you write a snippy, horrible email back. Only 10 minutes later do you read the email and you realise that you misread it the first time. And what it mean. Hopefully you can sort of stop, go make a cup of tea, do something else, come back to the email and reread it once the reactive part of the brain isn't responding. And a good story about that, while I was at work at the BBC the other day, one of my work colleagues, he came and sat down, hadn't seen him for ages. I said, "Oh, hiya." I said, "I've got something for you." And he went, "Oh God, no, what have I done?" I said, "Are you suffering from extreme stress at the moment?" He went, "How on earth did you know that?" And it's because he was in the reactive part of the brain. So he automatically assumed, when I said I'd got something for him, he automatically assumed that it was going to be something bad or he was going to get told off because he's in the reactive part of the brain. It actually was a walnut whip, because he'd never had one before because he's too young to have actually experienced a walnut whip. So it was a good thing.
Yeah,
If
but,
you like,
but don't you think that a lot of us are living in the same place as he is?
yeah.
We're all expecting things to go wrong and that we've done wrong and that it always happens to us and not for us.
Yeah. And and the definition of stress is not beating the heck out of somebody that you'd seriously like to beat up.
Really?
Yeah, that's the definition of stress, because actually what stress is withholding. You're withholding your emotions when you're stressed. You're trying to behave, professionally or within your values and constructs and things like that. So when you're stressed, you are withholding yourself, actually snapping at somebody or getting uptight, so all of the feelings of stress are kind of push down, push down, push. It's all being held in your body and your shoulders, and it's about holding and tightness. And the thing about justifiable anger is this is where it all sorts of starts. So something can happen, you don't respond to it, then the next thing happens, and the next thing happens, and the next thing happens. It's a network of effect. So it could be that something happens that you could respond to in a very professional, justifiably angered way, and then you're not holding onto the stress because you've dealt with it immediately, rather than not dealing with immediately and all of your stress building up to the point where you come home and you suddenly shout at the kids or your partner or whatever it is, and you kind of like come out of nowhere. In a way, it's kind of counterproductive. We don't engage with our anger, we repress it, it comes out in stress, and then we end up losing our rag a little bit later down the line anyway, because it has to come out somewhere, or the repression becomes so deep that we become depressed.
Yeah.
And that is a real problem, because if you look at the epidemic of that at the moment, and a lot of this comes down to the ideas of what we should and shouldn't feel.
Yes. I was in a situation the other day, and it was a number of things happened over a few hours, and I held it in and I held it in and I held it in, and I was getting angrier and angrier as the day went on, and I didn't address it. I got home that night and I was still angry. I had a glass of wine. I was still angry. I went to bed and I was still angry. And I got up in the morning and my jaws were killing me because I'd ground my teeth all night. I'd tossed and turned in my sleep. I'd rubbed my nose so hard in the pillow it went bright red because I was so angry. So I didn't exert my justifiable anger. I bottled it in, and it really affected me badly. And I still think about it, and I think, should I have done something about it? But to me, the moment passed.
Yeah, and sometimes when the moment's passed, it's really hard. I think, Paula, what you're suffering from is nice person syndrome.
Somebody told me that the other day.
Well, I mean, and to be honest, I had that all of my life. And, and I think that there's nothing wrong with being a nice person or a kind person or a good person. But here's the thing. Are we abusing the abuser if we allow the abuse to continue?
I don't think we're helping them. We're assisting them. We're empowering them to be even more abusive to other people because they're abusing their authority.
Absolutely. And I think that this is the thing, and this, especially people who are of a spiritual persuasion, we are the ones that really, in a sense, double judge everything all of the time, because we kind of go, oh, I'm feeling angry. I shouldn't be feeling angry. I should be able to spiritualize myself through this. I shouldn't be feeling angry. I should be able to justify my anger, get over the other side of it. And if I can't, then I'm obviously not meditating enough, or doing enough yoga, or blah, 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 because I'm supposed to be Zen-like. Well, there is a reason why Buddhist monks go and sit on the side of a rather tall mountain in order to reach enlightenment, so they don't have to be around other people.
I never thought about it that way. And then you get these people that say, when other people are horrible to you, well, it's their stuff, it's not yours. But what on earth does that matter when you're sat in the middle of it and you're the one that's enduring their stuff that's upsetting you?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what do we do? Do we allow them to walk away with their stuff with them? Or do we help them unpack their stuff and realise what a load of nonsense their stuff is, and the stuff that they're carrying around is completely ridiculous? There's a very big difference in turning around and making somebody else bad for their stuff. So when you want to make somebody else bad, we're coming at it not from justifiable anger, but from one-upmanship. And we feel disempowered, so we want to take down somebody else's power dynamic. And so, you know, and the world is full of power. Oops, I just had a little move. The world is full of power dynamics, which is that when you kind of like think, oh, you know, I don't value myself, you're very likely to pull the value of somebody else down. And it's a little bit like a train leaving the station when you go, oh, we're moving. And then you look out the other window and go, oh, no, it's the train next door that's moving. It's not this train. We have the same perception filter with, you know, you've got two people. Actually, I shelved my nails apart from that one's chipped. We've got like two kind of like things where there's this person, and you may be feeling like you're having a low self-esteem day, so you're kind of like sliding down. And one of the ways in order to rebuild your self-esteem, because now you're looking at this other person who's flying and doing really, really well, you know, and then you think, oh, well, the best thing to do is put this person down. This person goes down and you go, oh, I feel so much better because, oh, how I feel about myself is so much more than how this person feels about themselves. And I'm not talking so much about the emotions of that, but how the energetic robbing of somebody else's self-esteem and power in order to make you feel greater. So what I would say with that is when somebody starts to do that to you, you can tell, because it's a feeling that kind of comes up in the pit of your stomach and you start to kind of like go, and one of our trigger points may be that we think, oh, I need to impress this person. So we work harder for them. And the more we work harder to make them like us or appreciate us or value us or to empower ourselves, and it can come from the fact that with their disempowerment of you buys into your own feelings about yourself, then you start to slip even further. And that's when you get like a cycle of low self-esteem. And I think when you have that justifiable anger, it says, I am precious. I have value. I stand for something in the world, and you don't get to treat me badly. And so I'm going to express to you, you know, this is how this is showing up for me, rather than kind of like going, you're bad, you're wrong, it's all your stuff, and your stuff is making me feel like this because you've got low self-esteem, so you're making me feel crappy. Doesn't work, because then we just get the one-upmanship, and then you've got a proper falling out, and that can be irreconcilable. But it can just simply be just literally stating your situation and stating this is what is true for me. I'm not making you wrong, but this. Yes. And by doing so, you've said it, and you haven't lost your rag, and you haven't got really angry, because you need to wait until the point where, I know what you said about not reacting quickly, because sometimes you feel like you've missed the moment. I think sometimes we feel like we've missed the moment because we don't feel reactive anymore, and that's a good time to do it. So when the reactive part of the brain has kind of like gone off from the massive affront, I'm going to put them up. The other part of the brain, which is the logic part of the brain, can go, I can see the bigger picture here. I can see why this has happened. And the reason why this is fundamentally important for people, you know, who are embracing their spirituality is because the world needs the people who are the most spiritual to actually be the leaders. And if you're the ones that are always being pulled off the pedestal by the underlings who want to empower you, you know, then what are we going to have? The Donald Trumps of this world? You know, we've got to have those people in key positions, and you're only going to make it to key positions if you have a huge amount of emotional resilience. And your emotional resilience says yes to anger because you're worth it, as the advert goes.
Yes, absolutely. So there is one point that I wanted to pick up there, though. It's the fact that people don't stand up for themselves because of fear. Fear of the consequences of talking to somebody who they perceive has got authority over them. You know, is there going to be any comeback from it? And actually, there can be a comeback from it if you tackle somebody who's got authority over you. They're likely to lash you back with something else.
Yeah. And I think the word that you use there is kind of like is tackle. Because tackling is not the best way to go about it, and yet it's the way that we're used to going about things. But actually, sometimes I just call it stating the bleeding obvious. So you know, I think the thing is so it's about how quickly you can do it. Because one of the problems that happens is, say for example, you start a new job, so you want to create a really good impression. So something happens and you ignore it, like, so somebody sort of like puts you down and you ignore it because you just kind of like go, okay, well, I don't want to create an altercation. I don't want to come across as being too sensitive. So I'll ignore it, and I don't want to, maybe I'm overthinking it, so I'll ignore it. And then the next thing happens, but because you didn't respond to the first thing, you kind of really can't respond to this thing because you've already lost your power on it.
Yeah.
Then by the fourth thing, there's not much you can do about it, because by the fourth thing, if you bring it up now, it's kind of a little bit too late. And it can just simply because whoever the person is in the power dynamic feels particularly insecure and wants to make sure that you're in your place. Well, you're new here and I want you to make sure that I'm the boss. And you go, all right, you're the one with the bigger paychecks. Of course you're the boss. And there are some people who will be vengeful, and they will have repercussions, and they will talk about you back to other people, and they will damage your reputation as far as they can. Theirs has probably already been damaged long ago.
Yes.
And what they're doing is kind of like just perpetuating their own reputation. But the thing is, it's about your values. And to me, your self-esteem is so much more precious than anything. I always say to people, it can take you longer to rebuild lost self-esteem than it can to get a new job, than it can to figure anything out, than it can to be in a new relationship. So there is the fear, especially if you've got mouths to feed, you've got things that you need to do, that if you actually state your case, then there's going to be negative repercussions. When those negative repercussions happen, if they do happen, you will deal with them and you will figure them out. Because there is no healing without truth. So you will speak your truth again, and if the same thing happens, you would take your truth to a higher power dynamic. Now, if that ends up being ACUS or one of the other governing authorities or a lawyer or whatever it takes, as long as you know that you're not coming from a victim mentality, that you're coming from this is unacceptable and it isn't right. It's about that thing of something not being right. If you go, this really isn't right and I have to do something about it, then you will always trust in yourself that you will deal with the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that comes up. Because here's the alternative, and it's quite scary. You don't deal with it. The next thing happens, you can't deal with that, you can't deal with the next thing, then the next thing gets worse and you can't deal with that, and then it escalates and you can't deal with that. And the more you try, the more better at your job you become, because you work harder and you try harder and you think you can work your way through this by proving yourself. And the more you prove yourself, the more this person feels threatened by you, and the more they put you down. And the more you try and prove yourself and the more you put you down, then suddenly, before you know it, you're not well and you are stressed and you're rubbing your nose in the pillow and you're losing the plot, and suddenly everyone goes, oh my God, she was right, she is useless, that woman, absolutely useless, look at the way she's absolutely falling apart. You knew she'd fall apart, didn't you? And look, she is falling apart. Oh my God, this is awful. And you suddenly realize that you have played this epic game where you've ended up being exactly what you were fighting against being. And at that point, you lose your job, or you go off the sick, or you have to try and find another job. And now you're coming at trying to find another career path, utterly broken.
And running away from it isn't the answer, because if you don't deal with this now, the chances are you're going to manifest the same behaviour wherever you go, because
yes.
it's within you. If you've not dealt with this and you choose to run away, you're going to be in the same situation, and there's no doubt about that. You're going to feel that you are the victim. Like you said, you'll come from that victim mentality that people always treat me like this.
Yes. And the thing is, and there is that kind of like the triangle between, the victim and the persecutor and the hero. And in a sense, you're either going to be, if you're not the hero, then, well, you've got two choices. You become the persecutor of the persecutor, or you just become your own victim, or you persecute yourself about the fact that you're a victim. You have to step into hero, because there's nowhere else for you to go. Because you don't want to be the persecutor, you don't want to be victim, and you don't want to be persecuting yourself about the fact that you're a victim. So you have to step into hero. The only way to get out of it is to step into hero. You have to step into hero. I do a lot of work with clients on their there's a whole different loads of fragmentation of their lost inner child. There's the abandoned orphan, there's the lost orphan, there's all of these abandoned orphans, and I think that all of us have got an inner child in some form of distress. And actually, when you work with a client, most of the time they absolutely hate their inner child, hate them, and are trying to kill them. And I'm not kidding. They hate the part of themselves that is vying for attention, or they hate the part of themselves that is weak, or they hate the part of themselves that comes home, has a glass of wine, and then is stressed in bed. They hate the part of themselves that isn't coping with whatever it is. And when you knuckle down and you go, you're talking about someone. In this session, you're talking about someone, you're not talking about yourself, because the person sitting in front of me has come to me and is telling me and is empowered and has had enough and wants help and is ready for the next stage of their life and is excited by the future and is sick to death of whatever this is that's going on. And so I say, so it's not you, is it? It's not the person sitting inside of me, but a different aspect of you. And when you create that separation, a little bit like we were talking before about having humour, when you look at your frightened inner child, mine constantly has a snotty nose. So she's a whingy, pale-looking child with greasy long hair and proper green bogies coming out of her nose.
Oh, Becky.
Every so often she sniffs back up and they just shoot back up into it and they need to come down again. And she's skinny and she's kind of like, she's wearing this kind of like long pink night dress that's sort of dirty at the bottom of it, like it's never been washed. Talk about an abandoned orphan. No one will even wipe her nose for it.
I really understand what you're saying, because when I'm triggered, I absolutely know it's my vulnerable inner child that steps up to the plate and does the inappropriate things, that starts to shout, that marches off, that sulks. And it's definitely the vulnerable inner child.
Yeah, and you want to kill her, right? You want to get it, get
Absolutely.
a bucket of water. Just yeah. And I mean, I look at mine and I'm like the first time, just wipe your own nose. What's wrong with it? And the problem is that hate is unjustified anger.
Yes.
Because in a sense, this kind of like inner child person just genuinely needs our love. Whenever we're feeling fear, I usually say it's because we're being too independent. So always get help when you're feeling fear. But also, you're feeling fear, the chances are you're abandoning yourself.
Yeah.
So when you find that inner child and you go, oh, come here, let me get rid of the snot on your nose, blow. Great, and sort of like, and I'm going to wash that. And you'd look better in jeans. Come on, sort you out, silly night dress kind of thing, and wash your hair. Come on. When you actually love that part of yourself that you're trying to kill and deny and say doesn't exist, and when you start loving that part of yourself, my inner 7-year-old shot up to the age of 16 when I started listening to what she wanted, and then suddenly she shot up to my age. Now it doesn't mean that I still don't have fractions of that get triggered, but she knows and I know that I will never betray myself, and therefore knowing I will never betray myself means I will never put up with somebody else's abuse. Never. I don't care how damaged they are, I mean, a lot of this came from having been in a relationship with a drug addict. And he said to me, and he was quite right, he said, you've got the same amount of self-esteem as a prostitute. I was like, thanks for that. But he was right, I did. And obviously he took massive advantage of that. And that probably wasn't even where it started. I mean, that was in my early 20s, and I would imagine that it started way before then. I remember having boyfriends who I'd pay their rent. It's like they'd time me coming over with their landlord being around, so that they'd kind of look at me and go, and before you knew it, out came a checkbook. Like, what a sap. And that's me talking about her again. Sap. No, come here, I love you. But it's like when you suddenly see that you are precious and there is something about you that needs to show up in the world because you've got a job to do. I actually believe that within my consultations with clients, it's not really about going back and hugging your inner child and loving your inner child. It's about embracing and accepting everything that you are. Yes, you are a snotty, snivelling little girl. Get over it. Yes, you have that as being part of who you are. Love that about yourself. And that's okay. And then the next thing is about having a goal, like something that you're working towards, having a purpose in your life. It often means that you can walk through all of the bits about yourself that you are struggling with, like that you believe are blocks or holding you back. It's usually because you haven't got something to get over them for. when you have a significant purpose, a lot of the blocks and things in life actually disappear, because if you knew that there was something you were fighting for, like women who can lift cars over, if a child is trapped underneath it, you have such capacity for strength when you know what your value is, which also means that if you're being bullied by somebody or somebody's speaking badly to you, your capacity of strength to be able to look at them in the eye and say, this is not okay with me. And they usually go, whoa, because once they realise that you can't be squashed, they stop trying. Oh, and it's less exhausting.
It is exhausting. It's really exhausting, you know, when you're in that place of fear. And you suggested some really, really good ways there of moving through everything without holding on to it. But not everybody has that capacity, and they need extra help. So if someone is listening to this and they're feeling that that is them, that describes them, they know that they're bottling all of this anger up inside them, where can they go for help? And is there anything they can do for themselves?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that you can do for yourself, because I'd go, well, call me now, otherwise. But where, you know, the first thing is write down all of your anger in the most disgusting possible way. Use as many F words as you feel comfortable with, and write it all out. Get really in touch with your anger. Get justified. Like, I am justified in how I feel, and write the whole thing out. Like, write down everything that you know, like really from a place of, how dare you treat me like this? Who do you think you are? I am somebody who matters. How dare you? Blah, blah, blah. And just and call them a lot of names, you know, just get out on a piece of paper, you know, or if you like kind of like recording stuff, or do it to a camera or whatever, you know, find a pillow you can beat up, but just get it out of your system, really get it out of your system, so that you can really kind of like get in touch with it. Once it's all out, there's a strange kind of like, there's a sort of like a peace that comes afterwards, and usually a good amount of laughter, because you kind of like look at it and just go, oh my God, who wrote that? That's nuts.
And imagine if somebody ever saw that as well. I'd pick it up straight away, get rid of it.
You can totally get rid of it, burn it, you know, safely, you know, rip it up, do whatever you want to do with it. But the first thing is by doing that process, what you'll start to see is, by getting all of that out, is you start to go, do you know what? I've had enough. And off the back of I've had enough comes I am enough. And I learned that from Dr. David Hamilton. So off the back of I've had enough comes I am enough. And from the point of I am enough, then we can actually start to have a conversation from a place of self-esteem, rather than a place of, it's not fair. Why is this happening? You can't treat me like that. We come from a place of, this isn't okay with me. And then whatever conversation you have, avoid using the word but. I was on hold a little while ago, sorting out my Wi-Fi for this call, and the person said, you know, we very much appreciate your call, but you know, we will get to you as soon as possible. And it was like, no, you won't. You're not getting to me as soon as possible. I've been on the phone for 20 minutes. But if they'd have said, we appreciate your call and we're getting to you as soon as possible, I would have just been like, oh, good, okay, great. Whatever is said after but, we stop listening. So if somebody says to you, could you work late? And you say, yeah, I can work late, but, you know, I'm going out on a date with my partner tonight. It's our anniversary. They don't give a shit. That's gone. That end bit after but has gone. But if you say, I could work late and I've got my anniversary tonight, then people will go, oh, no, don't worry about it. No, that's fine. So whenever you're speaking, always come from the it's not okay with me. Don't come from a you can't do this, you shouldn't do this. Don't mention you. Everything needs to come from the I perspective. Don't use the word but. Look at them straight in the eye when you're saying it. Stand tall, shoulders back. Really, really be clear on your body language. I imagine that I'm Angelina Jolie about to address the UN. You know, and you might find that when you're expressing this, emotion comes up and you start trembling. Allow the tremble to happen. If you need a minute, you put your hand up, which is a universal sign for stop. So the other person can't speak whilst you've got your hand up. That's the rules. So you just go and put your hand on your chest, because actually, when you are being emotional about something, people tend to pay a heck of a lot more attention when you're being emotional. So there's nothing wrong with being emotional. Put your hand on your chest, take 3 breaths, and then go, so the thing is, don't elongate stories, just cut to the chase. Nobody's got time for it, nobody cares. They don't want the massive story. They don't want, 5 weeks ago last Tuesday. Just really stick to the facts of the situation and come with a resolution. So if you've got a boss that's kind of constantly putting pressure on you and not really telling you what they are expecting of you and blah, blah, blah. So you say, look, I can see that you're getting frustrated with the way that, work has been going. I'm feeling the same thing and blah, 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 blah. Could we, meet once a week just for 5-10 minutes, just to be really clear? Because I know that you're really busy at the moment. I'll be honest, I'm not sure I've been able to hear you being clear with me. So if we could do this, this would be great. So it's just kind of putting things out there. And most people, because when you're stressed, you've got a real blind spot about your behaviour. Most people, when you call them on it, are really sorry. They don't realise that they're doing it. Or they become really sorry because they are really sorry they got called on it. Either way, sorry is good.
Yes, and you've mentioned that how important language is, and it really is. I mean, behind every but, if you notice all the buts that you've made in all of your life, you'll know that an excuse always follows.
Yeah, and nobody cares. Nobody wants your excuse, so they stop listening.
And the second point was, if you can talk to somebody with mutual respect, instead of going at it and tackling them, then they will develop that mutual respect from you and they will listen. But if you're going to go in with that victim mentality, it's an instant switch off, and it gives them permission to fire back at you.
Yeah, it really does. It does, and to justify their behaviour. But if you blah blah blah, blah, and then it becomes like a one-upmanship thing.
Yeah.
I was somebody who always tried to fight against being angry because I was a really angry person, and I was angry about a lot of things, but I didn't consider myself to be an angry person. And it came up when I went to go and see an osteopath, and she said, "Oh, you're carrying anger in that shoulder." And I was like, "What?" And so she said, yes, she said, you've got a lot of anger issues, and I think you need to express your anger. And I was no, I don't. And it was a really I don't think I do. So I asked all of my friends, and they all said, you're the least angry person I know. You're constantly happy. You're never angry. Then I knew I had a problem. Because why could I be the least angry person I knew? So I decided to really get in touch with my anger and get really angry about stuff. And I got a big kind of stick, and I beat up a pillow until I killed myself laughing because it was ridiculous. I got very angry about in the ways in which my needs were not met in my childhood, hence the snivelling, abandoned orphan. Got really angry about that. And to be honest, I started running out of things to get angry about, and the anger wasn't shifting. So I thought, well, what would I say to a client? And I thought I'd say, in what ways is this anger serving you? My God, I loved being angry. And I realised that when I was angry, I felt powerful. I felt safe. Because I've done a lot of travelling, and I've been attacked a few times. One of the times was in Australia, and when the police left, they said, look, love, he's not going to touch another woman again, even if she bigged him. Because I attacked the guy back, and I went running after him. Because I had this anger inside of me that was triggered so easily by somebody, trying to pull me to the ground in a darkened street in Australia. And so my anger made me feel safe, made me feel powerful, and made me feel like, Meh. And when I realised, I thought, actually, this must be coming out in some ways. So I went back to my friends and I said, do I have some kind of edge? And they said, no, not anymore, but you did when I first met you. You were very defensive. I was just like, whoa. And they were like, yeah, didn't took me a long time to really get to know you.
Yeah, so anger can manifest itself in many ways, can't it?
It really can. And having that edge basically was like, you're not going to mess with me, edge. I've been here before, you're not going to mess with me, edge. And, now my boyfriend calls me the nightgown vigilante because, if there's a bit of argy-bargy in the street, I'm out in my nightie, kind of like, oi! What do you think you're doing? Calm it down. There's people trying to sleep. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know why I always go Cockney every time. And yet we live in a world where we turn a blind eye from somebody being attacked in the street. What do? We film it on our phone? No. you want someone who's angry. You want somebody to rock up who's angry, who's going to be like, you leave him alone. I mean, okay, you've got to be a bit careful with that, because you can end up shocking.
Exactly. You actually say that an angry person is an awake person. Why? Can you explain that? Why is an angry person an awake person?
Well, when you think about it, if you look at the world and the way that it is, if you aren't at least a little tiny bit angry, then you're not listening. You know, if you're not really annoyed at big business and people being abused and the rat race and all of that stuff, if you're not thinking about animal welfare or plastic or all of the things I love getting depressed about, if you're not thinking about that stuff, if you're not angry about it, if you're not outraged by the way that humanity treats, you know, each other, if you don't feel any of that, you're not awake. You're not awake to this world. And it doesn't mean spend loads of time kind of like, you know, sharing negative pictures on Facebook and propagating misery. But an angry population is an active one. And this is why I believe we are kept scared. Because when you're scared, you're passive and you do nothing. So if we keep feeding fear in the media, well, great, because then you'll do absolutely nothing, and then you won't stand up against the very extreme rich people who end up, I believe, governing our governments. Yeah. So we then don't stand up against kind of like companies that know that there's a massive plastic problem and are doing absolutely nothing to change it, because it's going to dent their profit margin. When you get angry, you get stuff done. When you feel fearful and you go, oh, well, you know, I don't want to do anything about that. Oh, dear. Oh, well, it's all, I'm so overwhelmed and overworked myself. How could I possibly take on anything else? Then nothing ever, you know, gets shifted. And this is why the most sensitive of us, the most spiritually sensitive, have to get in touch with the power that is our anger and wield it where justified. But we're too scared to, because we spend half of our time going, oh, I don't want to be in my ego. You know, I'm trying to get rid of my ego. No, embrace your ego. You're in the physical body. You're supposed to have an ego. Embrace it. Use it wisely. It's one of your greatest tools. It isn't something that you need to get rid of, unless you can go and sit on the top side of a mountain and have people bring you food. That would be nice. But if you're in the real world, where we're actually having to get on with life, not sitting on retreat somewhere doing a, you know, downward facing dog, then you have every right to be angry, because this isn't right. It's not right. And that is therefore justifiable anger that will make shifts and get change done.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know if you do know my history, but I don't like to say anarchist, but I did fight the system and I lost. But, you know, I did do everything. You know, I became very angry when I was younger. I lost all my properties. I fought against the courts. I fought against the judges. I fought against the corporation, the Crown Corporation. I did my notice of intent to the Queen. And I spent so much energy fighting for the things that I thought were absolutely wrong, and how people are kept in this place of fear and control because they comply when they're in a place of fear and control. And I see it every day. Yeah. I still see it. And I did my time of doing that.
The thing with all of those things, and I've done that myself as well, and I felt I'd lost. But, you know, I don't know what impact me just standing up actually had, you know, because you think that you've lost, but actually, you know, there's a big thing there, but it's made of a lot of individual people, and you don't know what you did and how that changed that person and what happened off the back, because we never really get to the what happened next part of this. You know, so we think sometimes, oh, well, I lost because I didn't get what I wanted. But did what you want show up in other ways? And we may never know the answer to that question. But I think, you know, I mean, I don't fight, you know, causes that, you know, I don't know. There are things where I sort of like think the best way of fighting something is by bringing love to it. But I think that sometimes, and certainly when you're younger, things like that you're describing, when something's really gone wrong and it's really affected your life, it's difficult to know, should I have dropped it and gone, well, it's now going to seriously affect my life if I continue with it? Or do I need to continue with it to find out who I am and where I'm at? Because there's this idea that, will I regret what I don't do?
Yeah. I think ultimately it's, for me, it's about acceptance, and that I don't need a judge or a jury to tell me that what happened to me was wrong.
Yeah.
I know it was, and I don't care what anybody else thinks.
Yeah.
I've just accepted that, and telling my truth really helped me, and it freed me of the burdens of the chains that kept me shackled.
Yeah, there is no healing without truth. Yeah, spot on.
No, there isn't. You can't rely on somebody to say, okay, I determined from this hearing that they were wrong and you were right. It makes no difference whatsoever.
Have you tried Judge Rinder? I mean, I don't know.
Yes, I love him. I think he's amazing. Again, he brings that sparkle of humour into hearing cases and residing over cases, and it's funny, but it's serious at the same time, a bit like you, Becky.
Very much. That's good. That's all we've been compared to Judge Rinder. That's brilliant.
But you get lost in all of that grief, in all of that anger, and you lose yourself. The true spirit and nature of yourself is repressed. And you have to break free of all of that and look from it from different perspectives, not just one, but from other perspectives. Because if you don't, you can't see the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And you've got your whole life ahead of you. And there is a massive picture of your life as well. And it's about having that purpose. And I think some things that you do know when to drop is when you go, does this fit into my purpose? Because is this just a mosquito that's trying to keep me away from my purpose, or does it fit into my purpose? So sometimes I think when you're very clear on what it is that you want, what your purpose is out of things, and this is one of the ways in which I deal with people who might be negative on social media. So say, for example, if you've got a purpose, which is to say, right, I'm an ambassador for a caring company, something that I care, that there is a caring element to this. Yeah. If someone's then kind of like, oh, this is really, you are crap and this is terrible and your company is awful and blah, 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 blah. Even if the person's right or wrong or whatever it is, if you respond to the person sending the hateful message, it's not about the narrowcasting of communicating with that one person who's angry. It's about the broadcasting of everyone who's going to read your comment.
Yes.
So even though you kind of think, oh, well, there's no point in responding to this idiot, because, they're just going to come back at me with another negative. It's actually about everyone who's reading this stuff. And someone who's really great at that on Twitter is J.K. Rowling, because she has brilliant comebacks to people, but I mean, you'd think, well, why are you wasting your time? You're hugely successful. You're a massive ambassador for this country. You absolutely astonishing books, all of the films, Why would you waste your time writing back to John Doe from Essex? Like, what are you doing? But it's the way that she can respond to somebody, and that response is for the audience watching, not for the person she's writing to. And I think when you start to see things in a bigger picture, because there's a lot of hate on social media, there's a lot of kind of disagreements, there's a lot of, I was talking to somebody the other day who was saying, I'm just having to unfriend people who write all of this meh kind of thing. And I think, well, it's uncomfortable, isn't it? Because then we cut off one side of the conversation. And one thing Facebook is really good at is just giving you one side of the conversation. If you read my newsfeed during Brexit, we were totally staying in Europe. If you'd have read my newsfeed during the last kind of like election, oh yeah, Corbyn had won. But it's because it picks the stuff that it sees you to want to see. And the shock in the morning when Brexit had happened, but I was thinking, because of course it's not a newspaper, and yet we treat it as such. We treat the opinions of all of our friends as being what the mass population believe in. Mm-hmm. And by disconnecting with people that we disagree with, we can't see the whole of a picture, and I think that's a shame, but it is hard to have idiots in your friendship, in your friends group.
Absolutely.
Go on.
Absolutely, because when you're trolled, everybody's watching you, and your response is absolutely critical to what people are going to think about you. I get trolled and I hate it, because I know that I have to try and respond in a way that's going to disarm the anger that they feel about me or about what I've said.
I wouldn't worry about disarming their anger. I don't think it matters. I think the number one thing is, what's your purpose? Like, I presume that you're getting trolled about the show. So if you were to think about what the highest vision of your show, what is it?
for me, it's about having people like you on my show that can give anybody listening a tip or a technique that can help them to feel better about themselves and move on in life.
Brilliant. So if that's your
stuck.
That's perfect. So if that's your purpose, when you're applying to that person and they're saying, I don't know, whatever it is that they're saying, oh, you're propagating blah, 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 and you're making people feel like this, and who do you think you are, da, 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 whatever it is. You can say, okay, I'm sorry that you're feeling like this. In other words, you are an individual just feeling like this on your own. It's interesting that you should bring this up, because I just did an interesting podcast with Becky Walsh. You might want to listen to it, da, 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 and link. Because what you're doing is you're using it as an opportunity to serve your purpose. So more people will go and look at that link, or, I went and had I was having a chat with Dr. David Hamilton. He says this about kindness, link, and so in that way, you're just using them to propagate your mission.
Good idea. I will remember that one, Becky. That is good. Yeah, because one went on for about 20, and my mentor stepped in and said, Paula, disconnect. And I couldn't, because I felt so sorry for this person that they had mental health issues, and I had to realize, it took me a long time to realize that it was because of a mental health issue and they didn't know how to disconnect themselves.
My
mentor said, stop now, disconnect.
Disconnect, you gotta go and stop.
And I did, and she said, you handled it really well, but you should have disconnected much sooner. Don't go into those things with people, just stop it.
I think the thing is you can't always answer what they're asking. This is why politicians don't do it. You can't always answer what they're asking, because quite often what they're asking is it's like they're living in a different state of reality. So if you're trying to put your reality into their reality, it doesn't always work. Like, for example, if you're doing public speaking, there's always, and you come to a point where you say, anyone got any questions? And someone will put up their hand and they don't have a question, but what they want to do is tell you something about themselves and their life and why really they should have been on the stage and you shouldn't. So, and they go into one. And you're kind of like thinking, well, they're going to wrap this up in a minute, but they're not, because they've got the floor. They've wanted the floor. They've got the floor. And the only way that you can really interject when someone's just gone into that, because they don't breathe either. So there's never a point where they're actually going to stop breathing, one long stream of, like I can do. And you have to go, wow, amazing. Do you know, I'd never thought of that. So, and then completely come in with something at a tangent, which is nothing about what they were talking about. And then
in their head, though, they still have this justifying anger inside them, because they want to be where you are and they're not.
But it's not relevant in a sense, and it's not justified. So it's not a justifiable anger then. It's a story-based bitter anger. It's not justified. A justified anger is you have done something deliberately to hold me back in life. So I'm justified in fixing that. Unjustified anger is when it's you represent a teacher or like, say, for example, somebody who works for the council. So you might have a go at the council worker, or a massive go at the person who takes your ticket for the train, or a massive go at a policeman, because of the system that they represent that is annoying you. That's unjustified anger.
Yeah, and that's bitter anger.
Yeah, and it's bitter anger, and it's unjustified anger, and it's anger at a system, because you're saying, well, the system is letting me down. But actually, it's not the person that's letting you down, it's the system that's letting you down. So the anger towards a person is always unjustified. Yeah. But if it's a person that has done something deliberately to hold you up in life, then there's such a thing as justified anger. And there's justified anger at large corporations as a whole, not the individuals who work there necessarily, but a large corporation as a whole that decides to come and do fracking next to a nuclear power station.
Yeah.
Because that's going to seriously destroy the quality of my life, if not, it's complete. So,
exactly. So justifiable anger doesn't have to be absolutely personal, one-to-one. It can be in the bigger picture as well.
It can be in the bigger picture as well. It's anything that isn't right.
Yeah.
But it's not directed at individuals, if they're working for a corporation, because you never know. I mean, we get justifiably angered about people who, kill endangered species. Yeah. Without necessarily seeing that the reason why they're doing it is they've run out of options to feed their family.
Yeah.
because you put in the same situation would do the same thing. So it's, some of it's about education. I think it's about empathy, it's about education, it's seeing both sides and knowing, but seeing your own side, rather than, because when we think, oh, you've got to see both sides, it's almost like in denial of your own side. See both sides, but be really clear about you and your own side.
And of course you are an intuitist, so how can people use their intuition to search out these root causes of anger?
Yeah, that's a good one. So your gut-led intuition tells you who to move away from, and the heart-led intuition tells you who to move towards. But your gut-led intuition can also be triggered by your psychology. So if you meet someone who reminds you of your maths teacher, and your maths teacher really bullied you at school and made you very humiliated, you're going to have a gut response to this person. And it might just be because that person looks like somebody, or has a similar energy to that person. So then you need to engage your heart intuition. And you can just literally do that just by putting your hand on your heart and just becoming curious. And you go, okay, so I'm curious about why I'm having a gut reaction to this person. And then usually you'll get it's almost like a clairvoyant vision. You'll have like a flashback to your old maths teacher, or you'll have a flash of some kind that sort of like tells you why you're having a reaction. So your gut, your gut is always, you can always respond to your gut, but I think it's better to go deeper using your heart-led intuition. And there's brains in the gut and the heart. So, they've got a vagus nerve and neurons and stuff. So, they are actual heart, they are actually brains. So they have a certain level of a consciousness about them. So engaging in the heart-led knowing means that you are always going to be coming in your curiosity from a place of love rather than fear. Whereas your gut is fear, it's response, it's run away. It's kind of like, oh, I've got a really bad gut instinct about that person. Always say, you should always follow your gut. But your heart is the thing that follows you to the right place, and your gut is the thing that follows you, that tells you what to stay away from.
Okay, well, I know that we've only touched the tip of the iceberg, really, with this topic. Anger, justifiable anger, bitter anger. It's a massive, massive topic that touches so many of us. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you for a one-to-one session or group sessions, where would they get hold of you, Becky?
Yeah, so my website, all the W's, beckywalsh.com, and also becky@beckywalsh.com. So that's my email and also the website. And also if you're in the local area of the West Country, amplesouthwest.com.
Okay, and I know how brilliant Becky is when she does her live workshops. So if you are close by, I really would 100% recommend going, and she has some wonderful guest speakers as well. And there is so much to learn from Becky, like today, for instance. I've taken a lot of learning away from this show today, and I hope that other people will as well. It's been amazing to have you on the show again. And just before we go, Becky, I wanted to ask you, what was it that made you so passionate about becoming the person that you are now and helping other people?
I think it came from having really low self-esteem, sort of like early 20s, right the way through, I think, for most of my life. I bumped into a girl on the train the other day that I went to school with, and she said, "Oh my God, you were so shy at school and really timid, you never spoke to anybody." And I was like, really? And it was a really welcome reminder. I thought, I was like that. And I decided to do something about it. I decided that this wasn't who I knew I was inside, and so I wanted my outside to represent my inside. And so that was a journey of self-discovery, I think.
And I'm going to put you on the spot here. Have you got a favourite quote or a favourite saying?
Do you know, I think Marianne Williamson, when she's talking about, it's not our brilliance that frightens us. It's not our weakness, or it's not our vulnerability that frightens us. It's our greatness that frightens us the most. That whole kind of like, that used to be on my toilet wall, all of her things. It got mistaken as being Nelson Mandela that said it, this really lovely kind of like speech thing. But if you look up quotes by Marianne Williamson, you'll see this huge thing that was written and read out by Nelson Mandela. And it is really powerful. And I think that's very true. And if she goes into politics, I can't wait to see that. So she's certainly like a very sensitive, spiritual person that wants to take on the world. So good luck, Marianne, with that one.
Yeah. Well, I really want to thank you for today's show. I'm so grateful that you found the time to come on. And I think there's going to be lots of people listening to this that can relate to the subject. And I could go on for at least another hour because it's just amazing to talk about this and to get some clarity, really, because I never realised myself that there was so many forms of anger.
I know, it's weird, isn't it?
It is. It's very weird. So I want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart, and I am going to come to one of your live shows again soon because I absolutely love your live shows. And of course, not to forget the resources that you have on YouTube.
Yes, I do. Yes, the YouTube channel is going really, really well at the moment. Lots of people finding me through YouTube. So, yeah, I'm really enjoying making those films. I tend to just let the camera roll whenever I'm feeling something and just splurge into the camera, then post it. And lots of people say, "Oh, you're so natural." It's like, yeah, just me. Just
So catch Becky on, is it Becky Walsh, your own YouTube channel?
Yeah, Becky Walsh Stand Up, I think, or Becky Walsh Stand Up Intuitive, I think, on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, so I highly recommend looking at those. If there's no excuse, wherever you are in the world, you will always learn something from Becky from any of her videos. So please tune in. And thank you for tuning in today, whether you're on live or on replay. And I hope to catch you up on the next show. Thank you, Becky.